Tonight we're discussing Ghana's global competitiveness. If you've not heard, Ghana has been ranked 103 out of 144 countries in the world, which is 11 places up in the latest Global Competitive Index. But all is not rosy exactly. Ghana is also cited for displaying strong public institutions and governance indicators compared to other countries in the sub-region. Now, the 2012-2013 Global Competitive Index report scores some aspects of the country's infrastructure as being good by regional standards, particularly the state of Ghana's ports. I'm sure many of you would wonder how information for this was collected. Well, these coupled with what is said to be a marked improvement in the country's basic requirements of its macroeconomic stability, health, and educational outcomes might have contributed to prop the country up this far. But Ghana is lagging behind international standards in the educational sector, and the rate of harnessing new technologies for productivity is also low. Tonight, we'll engage the Global Competitive Index and ask ourselves if we deserve to gloat over the 103 ranking. How and when can we reach for the topmost position? It is PM Express on your Joy News channel, and you can tag along by sending your comments, contributions and suggestions to short code via 1760 or post them on our Facebook wall. My name is Stephen Enti. I have with me in the studio Sydney Casely Hayford, who is a business analyst and investment consultant. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Global Competitive Index. I know many people who are at home might be wondering what exactly this is and why should we care?
Well, the Global Competitive Index is a benchmark. We're generally trying to position ourselves in the world to see how we stand compared to other countries, one, and also where we can focus our energies on in order to be able to improve our whole environment and our business environment as we can. So, I mean, the whole idea of the index is to give you a chance to see from an independent, objective person's view exactly where you are compared to other nations of the same ilk as you are, and also who are much bigger than you.
So this is actually a big deal.
Well, it is a big deal depending on how you want to position yourself and how you want to develop your economy. If you do want to grow as a country and you want to be an attractive place for people to live in and work in and want to come to, then it's a huge deal.
So typically, what are the indicators? What do those who collate this report take into consideration every year?
Well, the report has been going now for a few decades. And what they're trying to do is to look at all the key infrastructure issues that they have and compare that to the macroeconomic issues, compare that to the market development issues. The index is based around 12 pillars, as they call them. There are 12 clear pillars on which they develop the indices. And within each of those pillars, there are several categories of which they monitor. Let me just use an example from the actual index report so we can tell. There are three groups which they use. They have what they call the basic requirements. They have efficiency enhancers, and then they have innovation and sophistication factors. These are the three broad groups under which they have them. Let me just repeat them so that viewers can hear. There's your basic requirement, there's your efficiency enhancer, and then there's your innovation and sophistication group. And those are the three broad lines. Within each of those, there are the pillars on which they measure. So the basic requirements has 4 pillars. The efficiency enhancer has 6 pillars, and the innovation and sophistication has 2 pillars. That makes up your 12 pillars. And within each of those, they are subdivided in order for them to be able to monitor and benchmark those against others and against yourself from prior periods.
So this is a thorough work they do every time. And when Ghana places 103, should we be concerned or should we be excited?
Well, we should be, because there are some areas where we're doing well. There are some areas where we think we're doing well, but comparatively we're not doing so well. Then there are some areas where we are failing miserably. And you can use it as a tool and as a guide to plan your whole national planning and development program, which gives you an opportunity to actually focus on certain specific areas and allow those areas to grow in order for you to improve the overall well-being of the people.
So you would say that we've not done badly then with 103?
Well, when you say we've not done badly, the question first is for us, where do we want to be?
Where should we be?
Well, where should you be is probably a little bit more difficult because then you're beginning to assume certain things. But where do you want to be? I look at it as being in a classroom and you ask yourself, well, this term I want to be first, or I want to be third, or I want to stay in the middle, or I want to do better than I did last year. And if that means moving up one place or two places or three places, then that's what you do. But this is an area where you have to sit back and say to yourself, are we happy with where we are? Where do we really want to be as a country, as a society? And we have to say, okay, as far as basic requirements are concerned, we want to be in the top 10, or we want to be in the top 50. And as far as the enhancers are concerned, we want to be in the top 10. So you desire to be somewhere. And then when you've desired that somewhere, they say, okay, if I'm going to get there, what do I need now to do? And use it as a guide. You can challenge some of the data that has been collated and say that, all right, some of it was not fair. And I think we're doing far better in some areas than other areas. And I'll give you a typical example. As part of the basic requirements, which forms 60% of the total index, we have one pillar there which talks about the macroeconomic environment.
Yeah.
That macroeconomic environment, as it stands, we are ranked 108 out of the 144 countries that were tested. Okay? But the macroeconomic environment is the one area where we have touted as a success story for our economy, that we have done so well with macroeconomic in the macroeconomic environment. And yet, compared to the rest of the world, 144 countries that were excuse me, that were sampled, we ranked 108. So you ask yourself, did we do well enough with all the macroeconomic issues? And should we be looking at doing a little more? And what does that little more mean? What does it entail? What are the other things that we need to drill down into in order to be able to understand what that score is? And within the index, you can drill further down into the macroeconomic environment and look at each of those component parts and decide whether or not those component parts will allow us to make any further progress in it. And that's the whole issue.
So let's take, for example, innovation and sophistication factors. If we were considering that requirement, as a country, how should we be approaching this? Should it be the responsibility of governments or businesses or private entities, SMEs? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that we up our ranking each time?
Well, this is purely about government. This is purely this is about government's environment that it is creating in order to enhance the business.
Right.
If government creates the right environment, businesses will take advantage of the environment and will be able to use it to the advantage in order to be able to enhance other factors. So for me, this whole thing is about the big picture. It's about the government, and it's about what government is supposed to be able to achieve.
So let's walk through them. I have this, the pillars. The pillars, public institutions, Ghana ranked 75. And yet, in my intro, you heard me say that institutions like public institutions, Ghana has been ranked good compared to other African countries. You think our public institutions deserve the 75 ranking? That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, because
especially because you have to compare to other.
And I have to go into the
institutions.
Calculations and see what the data was gathered and how there are formulae that are used to calculate, and those are all part of the report. But do we deserve to be 75th? I think that any score, excuse me, if I'm using this, I think that any score that we rank less than, well, if we ranked well, we have to interpret the score properly. The higher the number, the worse it is.
I see.
All right.
I
so
see.
the lower the number, the better it is.
Better
it's one of those things that viewers
so
have to.
For example,
viewers have to adjust.
for scoring 110 for infrastructure and scoring 75, it means that 75
was better than 110. All right, because it's a rank of where you are, out of the 144.
Great.
So out of 144, we came 75th in the health. So the question is, we are somewhere close to just below halfway on that. Is it good enough? Well, maybe it is, but we need to drill down if we're going to look at it and say, okay, so on that particular score of 75, what exactly brought us down?
Yeah.
What is it didn't do very well that we were marked down for, and then determine whether or not there are some places where we could have done better and we should have done better, and other places where we didn't. And that's the way I would look at it, rather than just looking at a pure number and saying this is it. However, I would say that there are certain areas where we should have advantage.
Which areas would that be?
Well, in the areas of agriculture, for example, where we are an agro-based economy and we are supposed to leverage that to our advantage. If we didn't do well in that arena, then I think we are not doing very well. When you come to mining, where we are a big mining country, we do our gold, our diamonds, our bauxite, etc., etc., etc. If we're finding that we are being marked down based on the law surrounding our minerals extraction and taxes, and if we find that the market accessibility that surrounds the import of machinery for mining and the export of gold for trade, and we're not doing well there, then we can say that we're not doing the right things. We should be known for certain basic freedoms also, and for certain basic justice, and that should score highly on the way we do business, and that therefore I would expect our ranking to be pushed higher, or we should go higher as we go forward.
And so, identifying what we could possibly have done wrong to score unimpressive for agriculture, what should be the way forward?
Let me see if we can find one so we can be more specific, because when we talk about, let's look, for example, at one where we weren't scored very, very, very high. All right, let's look at the institutions one, where we were ranked 75th out of the 144.
Yeah.
So on institutions, all right, and I happen to have picked a complicated one. Under institutions, there are 22 different categories in that pillar. All right, there are 22 different categories. Now, some of the ones where we didn't do too well, we are positioned at 115 when it comes to irregular payments and bribes, so that we are being seen as a more corrupt society. That I think we should fix, and that we can fix very quickly and raise that score. So that is number one. So 115 out of that, we have a problem. Now, the other one where we didn't do too well on that is we were 94th on business costs of terrorism. All right, 94.
That's a very weird.
And that's a very
measure.
weird measure. And you ask yourself, so what was the basis of that?
Exactly.
And what are the actual data points that we use? And I don't know. I haven't got the full detail on this one. But business cost of crime and violence, we were marked 94th. Okay.
Good or bad?
Well, you see, for me, anything that I see as a stigma of society, I say it's not good.
Yeah.
All right. On organized crime, we are 78th. Now, when you think about it, I don't really know of organized crime in Ghana, but the powers that be and the data that was gathered have made an assessment of this and have used it as a score. Now, if we understood this a lot better, and the report is there. By the way, the report is nearly 530 pages long, so it takes a while to wade through it.
Assimilate all of it.
But I would like to see that we use this as a guide and say, okay, for certain things, we are not going to go below 50th. That has to be like our benchmark. We don't want to go below 50th in any of those things, and that's where we want to be. Okay?
So seriously, if you look at South Africa, for example, South Africa was ranked 52nd in the world and ranked first in Africa. Ghana also ranked 10th in
Africa.
Africa before 103 in the world. I mean, first in Africa and 10th in Africa. Would you say that the difference in ranking from first to 10 means Ghana didn't do too bad generally? I mean, considering that there are several African countries who
well, I don't know how many African countries are there.
There are a couple. I think that with the exception of Botswana, Gabon, Mauritius, Namibia, Rwanda, Seychelles, and South Africa, the other 36 African countries included in the GCI fall into the least competitive group. So we're looking at...
So there are 36?
There are, no, apart from these countries, there's 36.
So there's about 41, 42
about 40, 41, yeah.
Okay, so if we came 10th in Africa out of 41, it's not a bad position. It's not a bad, but I'll be curious also to know who came ahead of us.
Yeah. Of course, we know South Africa came ahead of us.
We know South Africa came first.
If we look at the indices, there is a map here where Ghana is 10th, ranked 10th. So before Ghana, we have South Africa, 1 in that group, and then we have Mauritius, 2. We have Rwanda, 3rd, and then we have Morocco, 4. We have Botswana, 5th. Namibia, 6th. Gambia, 7. Gabon, 8. Zambia, 9. And then Ghana, 10.
And then Ghana, 10.
So these countries were ranked better than us.
And for me, that's probably a little difficult, because to think that the Gambia is a dictatorship and they're still ranking higher than us, that worries me. That concerns me. Because
would you question the country's performance, or you would question the collation of the data?
I would look at the collation of the data, because I would think that the Gambia should score very, very low on democracy and freedom of right to information and stuff like that. So, all right, but let's not worry about that. We came 10th. We came 10th in Africa.
Let's deal with that.
Let's deal with that. South Africa came first. Now, for me, the proof of it is always in the eating. You go to South Africa, when you land, you are impressed. There's no question about it. Everything works. The lights work, water runs, the roads are clean. Inner city is always a problem, because everybody has inner city problems.
You don't think
Even
Ghana
America
can aim at being that?
Well, we should aim at being that. You know, and for me, I think that the fact that we still haven't solved the electricity problem bothers me a lot.
50 years on.
Yes, and we're still struggling with it. The fact that water doesn't flow every day in everybody's taps is a problem. There aren't that many of us. There aren't that many of us. The statistic here says we are 25.1 million people. I thought we were 24.2 or 24.3 million people, according to the 2010 census. But give or take that, there aren't that many households, and we have made mistakes in not planning properly and not putting in the right systems, and we've starved ourselves of infrastructure. And infrastructure, by the way, is one of the worst things that we were scored on. We didn't do well in infrastructure at all. So we clearly know where the problems are, and it is time for us to, find a little bit more space to actually put some money into infrastructure and development and grow some areas, so we can actually get some a good brownie points, as they say, out of it. But so far, the way things are going, it becomes very difficult, because from one manifesto after the other of any political party, we have discontinuity. And as we don't continue to support programs that a previous government has started, we are always going to get this perennial, stop and start, and it doesn't bode well for the country.
And you think that if there was a workable or functioning national development policy, that will solve all this back and forth? Today is senior high school 3 years, the next time is 4 years, and the next time we revert.
Well, I don't see that particularly as a planning problem. I think that that is a policy issue, and that policy must be set by the Ministry of Education, and we move on with it.
We move on.
To change somebody's life in school from one year after the next, I think is poor judgment on the part of our leaders, and I think it's not fair. When I was in university, the universities were closed down for 2 years when I was there, and that was a pity, because it deprived a lot of us, which is where we all ended up going abroad. Yeah. Because if you really wanted to pursue your education and you really thought you had a chance, you went out of the country.
Yeah.
So you could manage.
If you could afford.
If you could afford it.
If you could get scholarships.
Well, with most of us, you couldn't afford it then, but you went there and you struggled. You fought for it. You got into a school, you did some light menial jobs just to sustain it and to keep it going. So you had to do that in order to survive. However, when you now come back to it, the policy and the planning of what we have to do, and we have this situation now with the Constitutional Review Commission, where the suggestion is that we should have an independent national development planning unit.
Which is what I raised, really. We should have one.
Well, but the thing is this: a
workable and functional
yes, but
one.
it clashes against the type of democracy that we are trying to run, because the political parties come with an agenda.
How does it? Yeah.
Well, if I come with an agenda, and if my agenda is to build the Eastern Corridor road network, because I see that to be a good trunk road that I need to develop in order to improve
relevant to your economic
relevant
plan.
to my economic plan.
Yeah.
And I start doing that, and then the next party that comes back decides that no, we don't think the Eastern Corridor road is the best thing to do. We think the Western Corridor road to harvest the cocoa and to bring
Eastern
it out.
Corridor, refocus on
Yes.
Eastern Corridor.
And that's what happens. So, and you win or lose.
But can we not
on the political platform
go behind the political considerations and have a development plan, for example, which will be sealed? I mean, through legislation.
Then your development planning.
I mean, if you take, for example, the National Health Insurance policy, when the NIA was passed, I'm sure there were regulations that were put in place. Governments come and tinker with some of it, but the concept of the National Health Insurance Authority still remains.
Yes, but the concept remains, but the party that comes and says, okay, the way it's being done is not right, we need to refocus it. We either need to drop the fees, raise the fees, increase the list of drugs, etc., etc., etc. That decision can make or break a vote. Okay, and you must allow that to happen, because we do have a political party voting system, and you have to be careful that the National Development Planning Commission doesn't become too supreme over and above the political parties, because if they can set the agenda,
the Constitution.
Yes, and if they set the agenda, nobody can come and change it. Then they are the supreme authority in the development infrastructure growth of the country. But the political parties and the politicians must have an opportunity to determine which path they prefer to go down. You cannot have a situation where the National Development Planning Commission can come and say, okay, from now on, free compulsory basic education for everybody. That's the plan. And then I come in and I say, hold on a minute, I don't think this is right. I think people must pay for a service, and I think government should recover some of its expenses. And I'm only putting this forward as an argument.
Yeah, sure.
So then who sways? Who determines what should go? You know, we are fond of this phrase in this country that don't politicize the police, don't politicize the army, don't politicize education, don't politicize everything. And yet,
but they are definitely political.
But it's a political environment. Yeah. You cannot not politicize things. You know, everybody has a view on what they do, and to take that view and use that view to implement a plan, a policy, a strategy of a way forward.
For the people.
It is politics. It is politics. So in so many ways, you can go so far and no more. And that, for me, is how we need to look at it. The fact is, we probably need longer-term planning, all right, longer-term planning in order to be able to make things succeed. But this is a challenge that we have in terms of our
challenge that we have in terms of our development. We're discussing Ghana's global competitiveness. I can bet you it's a 545-page document which we are trying to sift through, so we'll get the relevant bits to make our discussion interesting. I'm here with Sydney Casely-Hayford, who is a business consultant. We're discussing Ghana's global competitiveness. Welcome back. So, Sydney, let's look at the data that was possibly collected by the Association of Ghana Industries.
Yes.
Now, the AGI has been conducting the Executive Opinion Survey on behalf of the World Economic Forum since 2008. Mm-hmm. Do you have any issues with their competence to collect relevant data that will put us on a good scale?
No. I won't even start questioning that. My reasons for that is that I believe that the institutions that we run in this country must have their own independence to put out what they believe is the right. positions. So I know that the AGI does a quarterly barometer of confidence, business confidence, which they put out every 3 months. And I get a copy regularly. In fact, come to think of it, I don't remember the last time I got one. But I'm on the subscription list and I get a copy. And they determine in their own way exactly what they think the business confidence is in the country, and they use their own criteria. So they do already have a mechanism of gathering views and coordinating and collating that information, which I'm sure they would have passed on to this the World Economic Forum for them to use as part of their report.
Right. I'm now joined on the line by Samuel Anochi. Samuel Anochi, Senior Policy Analyst for the Association of Ghana Industries. Thanks very much, sir, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Good. So we've been discussing Ghana's ranking of 103 on the Global Competitive Index, which the AGI has been collecting data for the World Economic Forum since 2008. Are there any special considerations or indicators that you could talk to us about, which you clearly remember during your collection?
Indicators for correcting the World Economic Forum?
I mean, you collected data for this whole thing. So are there any special indicators that stick out in your mind?
Yeah, in fact, the World Economic Forum questionnaire is designed by the World Economic Forum itself. It's not the business barometer that AGI does.
Okay.
And it has about 100 questions that cut across health to infrastructure. And a country that is supposed to qualify when we're able to administer about a minimum of 80 questionnaires. And that is what AGI does for World Economic Forum.
Right.
But it's not only the survey alone that they use to compute the competitiveness index. They use other
indicators,
macroeconomic data. Yeah.
So you only submitted the questionnaire?
Yes, we do collect the questionnaires and then just post to them, and they will analyze combining it with our macroeconomic data.
So how many questionnaires did you collect for the 2012-2013 data collation?
89.
89?
Yes.
And out of this 89, are you able to share with us your analysis of the questionnaire data you collected? Or you didn't analyze them? You just collected the information and sent to the WEP, right?
Yes, normally we are not allowed to analyze. We collect the data and then send both soft copy and then hard copy to the WEF.
Right.
And
so
they analyze, because it's competitiveness index, is not country by country basis. They have to compare it. In Africa, for instance, they compare it with the sub-region, which is ECOWAS, and then combine it with the other part of Africa. So they group the countries into levels. Basically, they have what they call factor-driven economies. They have efficiency-driven economies and then innovation-driven economies. So depending on where you fall, then they will compare the indicators. So it's not like standalone analysis that they do, and it's a bit compressed. Right.
So let me ask you, after the report was published for 2012-2013, how did it strike you that Ghana ranked 103 out of 144 countries after all the data you collected?
Yeah, it was not a bit of surprise because, they have about 12 pillars that they use in assessing the competitiveness of any economy. I was even thinking that we could have done better if we have improved in our macroeconomic environment. Yeah, so I was not all that surprised because basically if you compare Ghana to the South region, we are doing well. Yeah, so I think we deserve the 103.
We deserve 103, but you don't think possibly we deserved better?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying, that if it was because of the exchange rate instability, If it's not because normally we are not able to do well in infrastructure and macroeconomic environment, but because inflation was a bit low this time around, I was thinking we should have even come below 100. But for the depreciation of the cedi, we could have done better than 103.
Now, macroeconomic environment was scored 108. What does this mean to the Association of Ghana Industries?
It's a bit worry for us because when you have a good macroeconomic environment, you're able to forecast your business well, and your price becomes a bit stable. And you know we are competing with other parts of the world where their price is a bit relatively low. So if the macroeconomic environment is not good, then businesses become non-competitive in Ghana. So we are looking at the situation where we can improve on our macroeconomic environment.
But you know, if you look at market size, the ranking, the ranking of 70 for market size, and you compare that to macroeconomic environment of 108, 70 possibly is a better ranking than 108. How do you reconcile this, that we have a good market size, we have our financial market development is 59, which is good, and yet macroeconomic environment was 108?
Yeah, it's because of what goes into macroeconomic environment. You know, they look at about 4 key areas, which are inflation, exchange rate, interest rate, and fiscal deficit. And you can see Ghana is not doing well at the moment in 3 of these, which is exchange rate, interest rate, and fiscal deficit. And these variables have implication on other variables. If you even say you are doing very well in terms of financial development and it's not trickling down on interest rates, I don't think your macroeconomic environment will improve. If the interest rate has come down a bit, then we feel Ghana could have improved a lot.
No,
so because we are not doing well in 3 of these variables, that is why macroeconomic environment is not that good.
Now, Ms. Anochi, let me quickly, before I let you go, run through the aspects which is the most problematic factors of doing business. I'm sure this will not come to you as a surprise from AGI that among the tall list of problems, most problematic factors for doing business is access to financing, and then corruption, tax rates, poor work ethic in national labor force, inadequate supply of infrastructure, inflation. Inflation, Ghana ranked 8, the score was 8.8. And then access to financing, 17.9. Corruption, 11.9. Tax rates, 11.5. Policy instability, 5.9. Let me just end here. But do they strike you as extremely worrying? We haven't gone into the details of this, but for us to record these low ranking in the most problematic factors for doing business must be worrying, right?
Yeah. It's worrying, but that is the situation we find ourselves because we live in a country where our policymakers do some of these policies.
So when you say situation we find ourselves in, it's like we're helpless, and you're more like the Association of Ghana Industry has no hope that we will recover or that we can edge up and do better?
I wouldn't say so. Yeah, it's not a helpless situation. We can do better, but it's all of us should come together, both the private sector and the private sector. If you take corruption, for instance, if the private sector is not, inducing the public servants, I don't think they will be corrupt. So we all have to sit down and come together and then make sure, we reduce some of these, challenges within the business environment.
So go on, sir.
Yeah, I hope, we can improve unless we are able to come together as a country and make sure that some of these things are being used to rank us. So how do we make conscious efforts to improve them. Once we're able to maybe, make conscious efforts, the situation will improve.
Conscious efforts. Let me pick your brain. Quickly, give me 2 or 3 recommendations that you will make for us as a country to do better in the next collation and next ranking.
I think we can do better in terms of institutions. Yeah, institutions and infrastructure. For macroeconomic environments, it's a little bit difficult because at the moment the deficit situation is not that good, and it will take time. Since we are going into an election, it will be difficult for this year, and we do collect this data early next year, which is February. So if we can maybe improve the regulatory and administrative framework, which is the public institutions and the infrastructure, because the ports is, very good in terms of the sub-region, but there's a little bit of congestion at the moment, which is temporary. We can improve it. So if we're able to improve the infrastructure and institutions, I think next year will do better.
Thank you very much, Samuel Anochi, Senior Policy Analyst, Association of Ghana Industries. So, Sydney, you heard him.
Yes.
We need cooperation. We need to work together as a country. And we need to possibly segregate areas which we feel strong in and invest our energies into improving these rankings. Is that the solution?
Not from my point of view. Everybody has a job to do. Everybody has a responsibility to undertake. The collective responsibility argument, in order to succeed, in my opinion, doesn't work. I have a different view. I have a different ideology. The minute you say to me, let's come together to make this work, then one of us has to agree to drop their ideological perspective so that we can make it work. When you get to that point, you are just going to talk and jaw for nothing. End of the day, the institutions have to be stronger, and that is a simple fix. It's a matter of politicians not being given the opportunity to interfere with institutional growth and institutional development. Then the next thing you're worried about is to make sure that, end of the day, if I'm a civil servant, my job is to process somebody's proposal or somebody's contract. I should do it without any favor, do it technically, make sure that you do it on time and that it gets channeled to the right person. If the person has to be paid, process their voucher within a reasonable period of time, make it happen, let them have their check so they can carry on. That is the responsibility of the civil and public servant. It is not my responsibility as a private contractor or a service provider to go and initiate that process in order to make it work. It is when that process has become difficult, as we say in Tree, say akoya tari na fe wo. That's when you go and you start giving in the little bribes in order to be able to push the process on, because your interest is piling up on the facility at the bank that you have gone and taken in order to be able to deliver to a contract.
So individual responsibility is more like it. I mean, every person in the public service must play their part, the part they're supposed to play in order to make the systems work.
Everybody in any category, from the executive presidents to Parliament, to the Supreme Court, to the commercial courts, to the public and civil servants, must do their job. They must have responsibility. Everybody has a job, including the chief executive of this country himself. And he has to do his job so we also can do our job. My job and your job really is to take advantage of whatever the macroeconomic situation gives us and to pay our taxes. That's our job. Okay? We haven't been elected and we haven't gone to run for any position in office. We haven't gone to do anything. All we want to do is to make sure that this process carries through so we can all survive.
Well, I have a couple of your messages, and Kwame Simpe says Ghana will progress and reach international standards as time goes on. And Suleimana Al-Hassan says we're getting there slowly but surely. Dixon Dizar from Laura says, I get disappointed when I see some of these rankings, especially where my beloved country lies. Things in the country aren't just working well, but propaganda seems to be eating us up. I think it's time we do away with the propaganda and wake up as a country to save this dear nation. And Victor Azuri from Bolga, you say that we know the realities on the ground. We don't need any rankings to be proactive. Asumi Samuel says, what a gangantuan ranking. And Ras Mali Hamza says, unprecedented ranking. And Felix Enim Ramos says, we don't see any reflection in our lives. It's a lie. Yaboa Kennedy, does it reflect in our daily living? Ghanaians are now politically mature. And Jimo Moses says Ghana needs to compete with the world, but let her harness the wealth of Africa and in a step that others will follow. And Pedro Asari Frank says, I think the fierce urgency of industrialization and modernization of our economy is key. We should radically tackle corruption. Casely Hayford, you heard, I'm just going to recap what Dixon Desire from Laura said. He says, I get disappointed when I see some of these rankings, especially where my beloved country lies. Things in the country aren't just going well, but propaganda seems to be eating us up. I think it's time we do away with propaganda and wake up as a country to save this dear nation. Do you share this view?
Well, yes. When the rankings are not good, you are disappointed. If you're in any class and you come towards the bottom end, it's a disappointment. But this, for me, these are the wake-up calls that you get, and you start thinking very, very clearly as to where you want to go next. And if Dixon is disappointed with the numbers because he thinks that, you know, we haven't done so well, let's pull out some good numbers so that we can at least get some good cheer. Then we realize that it's not just doom and gloom. In the seventh pillar that we have, the seventh pillar is on labor market efficiency.
Yes.
Now that is probably where we did best.
Pretty well.
In any way. And we scored, the worst score we had is the flexibility of wage determination. We were ranked 105. Now, I am not sure.
Flexibility of wage determination.
I think we should be higher because we do have good union representation. We do have good setting of the minimum wage, the process.
Single spine.
I think it's there. We have a single spine, and I think that kind of works. So maybe we're not doing as well as the other competitively, so we didn't do too well. However, on hiring and firing practices, we scored 30th. All right? Hiring and firing practices, we scored 30th. So that's good. At least we're in the top 50 there. Then reliance on professional management, we came 50th, which is also very good. So that's good news. Brain drain, we have stalled it. We came 53rd. So we're seeing a lot more of a reverse brain drain now. Exactly. More people coming back home and trying to settle in and do a lot more. But most importantly, women in labor force as a ratio to men. Women to men ratio, women in labor, men to labor force. We came 10th. Okay? And that is excellent because that tells you that more of our women folk are actually engaged in direct labor of some sort and working. And I think that is a good score. Then the other thing we also do on financial market development, where we did also pretty well. Financing through the local equity market, we came 41st, 41 out of 144. Regulation of securities and exchange, we came 47 out of 144. And then legal rights index, as a legal rights index, we came 24 out of 144.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. So within all of this, the overall gets swamped because we are skewed towards doing too bad in some places. But there are pockets of very, very good, very good news, and I think that's very, very good. Oh yes, mobile broadband subscriptions.
Yes.
Out of a population of 100 per each 100 person, we came 42nd. Now that is great.
That is
great.
You
know, and that's 42nd out of 144 countries, and that's world countries, not just Africa.
Yeah.
So to come 42nd, and I wish I had seen that figure earlier. I would have drilled down to the sub-Sahara and across Africa, because I know that in terms of mobile penetration, we are way ahead of most of our counterparts in the rest of Africa.
So, Mr. Casely-Hayford, in brief, what would you say to wrap up our discussions on the Ghana's position or ranking on the Global Competitiveness Index?
I think for as long as we have gone up, our ranking has improved and not deteriorated.
11 places.
Yeah, and 11 places is a big leap. time permitting, would have been nice to see which specific places we leaped from and how we were able to get, you know, the 11 steps up. But that notwithstanding, I am encouraged. I think it's a good sign. I think that for us to actually have improved significantly like this can only mean that the next government is going to even do better, because we see it is with things like this that we, the people, get a chance to put pressure on our government and say we need more to be done and we need a lot more, you know, support in order for us to survive. So for me, this is very, very good. I would have wished for better, but
this is
from where we are, this is not bad.
So what's your prediction for what do you predict to be Ghana's position in the next ranking, the next collection of data?
Well, you see, that's a political question.
I know.
It's a veiled political question. I think depending on the kind of programs that we have come in, we will be in a better position to judge. Yep. If we are able to use the oil and gas resource very well, if we are able to keep pushing with agriculture, cocoa has dropped from the 1 million metric tons we expected. If we can get that on stream, if the ports can be cleared up, if transportation can be done, if the infrastructure can be improved, you see, there's so many factors that will go towards making it, and all of that depends on the next government's priority areas and where they think they want to put their best foot forward. So without having seen everybody's manifesto, I've only seen the manifesto for the PPP and for the NPP. Once we see all the manifestos, we are going to be in a better position to compare and to be able to judge.
To make a prediction.
I would like to see us next time, certainly somewhere between, you know, 75 to 100. I wouldn't like us to go below that.
So which areas would you like to see us improving?
Financial intermediation must improve. We must have lots more access to long-term finance. That crunch that we are facing now, which is the access to finance, which has always been at the top of this list, not only this one, but other independent reports that come out always flag access to finance as a key challenge. And we should fix it, and it is a fixable problem.
How should it be fixed?
Well, you fix the access to finance by, first of all, interest rates have to come down. People have to be able to have the opportunity to be more banked. We are getting there because the savings and loans, the microfinance and the
interest rates are not coming down, are they?
Well, they have to come down.
How would they have to come down?
The Bank of Ghana has to. The Bank of Ghana has to lay a whip.
It comes down.
The Bank of Ghana has to lay a whip and say, this is the spread that we are going to have, and this is it, and you can't go plus or minus above this.
And you think this is possible?
Yes.
Why haven't we done this in earlier years to make sure that
$1 million question. Bank of Ghana has been using what they call moral suasion, and it has not worked. It is time for us to do. Nigeria did it. Other countries have done it. There's no reason why we should not do it. And the Bank of Ghana has the authority to do it. And they should do it. Because, you see, the philosophy is this. If you price the rates too high and people can't afford to borrow, they borrow it because they need the money. And they know they're going to default, but they're going to borrow it anyway. But if you drop the rates in such a way that it is manageable, more people will come and borrow money. The bank should be able to make it work. So there's a lot that has to be done by central bank, and the commercial banks will step in and pick it up if they have to. But our central bank has to get stronger. It has to get tougher.
It has to start
get a
biting.
lot more. Yes, it has to. It has to, because if I am selling tomatoes and you come and tell me, look, your tomatoes are a bit expensive, so why don't you reduce the price so that people can buy more? Okay? But people are buying at the price at which I'm selling it. Why would I reduce it? It is totally antithesis to what the human person thinks of. If I'm making the money and I'm not having a problem, people are not walking away from my product or my service, why am I going to drop my price?
But why is the Bank of Ghana depending on this moral swish as a regulation too?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No. I don't know. They have their own reasons, their own logic. They've done their own analysis, and they think that it's better for them to do it that way. I tend to disagree with it. I think they should get a little tougher and whip and crack the whip and let people fall in line.
But as an analyst, I'm sure you may have a faint idea of what could influence the Bank of Ghana to use this moral
Without
switch?
having spoken to anybody in the Bank of Ghana, without quoting anybody, all I can say is their preferred choice is to get the banks to get the markets to respond to what they want to
And
do.
this has been over the years.
This
it's
has
been the strategy.
it's been quite a while now.
But it's time to change that.
It is time to move on with it. It is time to move on. It's time to move away from it. It's time to get it going.
Well, I'll take a few more of your messages before we make way for Wild Ghana, which is coming right after PM Express. Victor Azuri says, once we are not talking about strengthening institutions, proper decentralization, that issues like water, light, housing, waste management can be tackled by local authorities, and the president doesn't have to worry about everything. We should forget about any meaningful development. Obama said it all, strong institutions and not strong men. Safo Labi Samuel Sr. says Ghana will surely develop if effective policies are implemented for the growth of the country. And thanks for this good education. But where can I access this document, the 2011-2012 report? How does the Chinese invasion affect firms in Ghana to derail them in global competitiveness? This comes from Joe Tamale. Well, Joe, I think you can go online. I mean, I went online to access it, and so you can go online to www.infobae.com. You can get it there. I'll give you the address, www.infobae.com. That will be the homepage where you can find this document. The document I have here is 545, so every country is captured there. You can get some education. Thanks for your message, Joe. And then good analysis. Hope these issues are trumpeted loudest when new parties take over, so they continue a national agenda. Tony, this is from Tony Okwapimai. So Tony is saying in Sydney that he hopes these issues are trumpeted loudest when the new parties take over. You think the political parties should make firm promises to improve our indices? They should tell us what they're going to do to improve Ghana's competitiveness.
Well, they should not only promise, they should come and do it.
They should deliver it.
They should deliver. It's time for the political parties to really put their money where their mouth is. If they decide that this is what we're going to do, and they make those campaign promises and they get voted in power, we are going to keep watching, we're going to keep looking, we're going to keep monitoring, and we're going to hold them accountable. And it is time for them to start delivering so that we can all get some benefit from all the hard work.
Now, earlier when we spoke with Samuel Anochi, I put to him the ranking that Ghana scored with macroeconomic environment of 108 and then market size of 70. And he was explaining it in a way which I didn't quite get. Why should Ghana score 70 in the market size, for example, and score macroeconomic environment 108?
Well, I think that if you listened or if you heard what he said, on the macroeconomic side, there are 4 different categories. And he indicated that we are doing well on one, but not doing well on the other 3. So those 3 dragged that component down and made us look bad. So even though he thinks that he says that we have got the inflation right, I think we have the growth of inflation right, but not the inflation figure itself. Inflation is still sitting at 9.5%, but the rate of growth has slowed considerably. In fact, it's only started creeping up recently. So that is a good thing because the rate is not going up too fast. But the other indicators on interest, on the currency depreciation, and on the fiscal deficit, those are all deteriorating numbers. So they pull you down in that category. On the market size category, I don't quite know, I don't remember what goes into it. But for us to have scored 70, the market size is the opportunity of people to come in and do business in a market environment. And I think that also relates to the purchasing power parity of individuals. If we have more purchasing power in the system, then people can, of course, go and spend money on the availability and the opportunity within the marketplace.
So do private businesses or investors take this global competitive index report serious at all?
Very, very seriously. Very seriously, because whenever any big organization wants to come into a country, the first thing they ask for is an economic profile of the country. and then they will go and they will search. And there are consultants who specialize in political risk analysis and economic risk analysis, and they will be engaged to produce a paper. Because if you're coming to spend $1 billion, $2 billion in a country over a 5 to 10 year period, you want to make sure that the environment is going to secure you and that you'll be able to repatriate your profits or at least make some money for your shareholders. And this is critical for anybody who comes in here who wants to come and do something grand.
So overall, I mean, if you for example, Casely Hayford, you are an investor and you say you are based in the United Kingdom or in the United States, and you are confronted with this new ranking, and after your thorough analysis of it, would you consider Ghana a favorable destination?
Yes. Yes, I would, because you see, the most important ingredient is stability. All right? Political stability is the most important ingredient for businesses. There are extreme businesses who prefer a dictatorship and an environment where it is loose and easy, and they can come in, they only have to talk to one person and they get a contract.
Sorted.
Some business people prefer that, but others also prefer a level playing field where they can come and compete, and they know that at the end of the day, there's not going to be a major upheaval which is going to toss their investment and their capital out of the window. So in most cases, the first thing you talk about is, okay, so where is this country going? Politically, are they stable? Is the economy working? Do we have adequate labor in the system to use? What's the cost of living like? What's the infrastructure like? How the utilities serving? So you have a ranking order which you look at. With some people, if you're coming to the services sector, you're not too worried about power stability, because you're only coming to look at a one block office, so you can put a generator in there, you are fine. But when you're coming to do manufacturing, you want to make sure you can get the cheapest source of electricity possible. And you look at everything, how the power it filters through, and where you're going to site your industry, and how that's going to get you to a port so you can actually get your product out of the marketplace. So these are very, very important ingredients. And when we don't score highly on port, and we don't score highly on the market, and we don't score highly on some of the other features, the infrastructure features, then you start losing the big opportunities, because money is always competing to go somewhere else.
Then it becomes worry.
Yes. Okay? Anybody who has money to invest is looking not only at one country, he's looking at comparing where he's going to put his money all the time. So if you are not ready, he'll look somewhere else for a while. By the time you are ready, he probably is already committed and he's not coming back here for another 5-10 years. So
thank you very much for the insight and education. Sydney Casely Hayford is a business analyst and investment consultant.